Mom said life would be easier without me, so I disappeared and let her live it that way. Her perfect life soon turned into chaos she never expected. Mom said life would be better without me. She didn't shout it, she said it like a diagnosis, sliding the iPad I'd bought her across the table with a neat little e-signature line glowing blue. From now on, you're just their sister. No more acting like their mother. Sign. Behind her, Elena and Marco blinked at me from a hallway, 15 and 17, and wearing that brittle confidence kids put on when they think a grown-up has chosen them. I stared at the clause headings, sibling boundaries, household roles, financial responsibility, and felt something go very still inside me. The stillness wasn't anger. It was the sound of a weight being set down. My childhood had ended at 10 with a burnt pot of spaghetti and a YouTube tutorial. Since then, my to-do list had been a life. Wake them, feed them, wash them, teach them, hide the overdue notices, forge Mom's signature on permission slips because her boyfriends didn't like paperwork any more than they liked kids. Last week she'd asked me when Elena would start becoming a woman. 3 years late to that party, but sure. I clicked the stylus anyway. You want me to be a sister? I said, meeting each of their eyes. You'll get a sister. Marco smirked at Elena. Elena exhaled like a balloon, untied. They thought I'd been dethroned. I felt lighter. The next morning, Mom strutted the kitchen on speakerphone, pouring stale coffee into a chipped mug like it was champagne. Everything's already calmer. Should have put my foot down years ago, she told the new man whose name I never bothered to learn. Around her, victory paraded through my leftovers, the casseroles I'd batch-cooked on Sunday, the laundry I'd folded into neat, forgettable stacks. This is how a real family works, she announced to the walls. Not the Clara dictatorship. So I gave them a democracy. I put on real clothes before noon. I walked to Starbucks and bought myself a breakfast I didn't have to split in halves and quarters. I rolled an ice stick over my puffy eyes and marveled at how quiet the morning sounded without alarms and reminders. And 3, did you brush your teeth? Freedom tasted like oversweet cold foam, and the first sip didn't even make me feel guilty. By second period, the consequences began to tap on the glass. Marco missed his first hour exam because no one shook his shoulder at 6:30. Elena arrived at school in yesterday's skirt with sleep-snarled hair and no lunch money in the pocket I used to check. Mom got written up at work for being 2 hours late. Apparently, the morning routine doesn't assemble itself while you flirt in the mirror. I didn't rush in. I answered no texts. When Marco FaceTimed me from the school bathroom, whispering that he needed a note to excuse the exam, I said, "Ask Mom." When Elena pinged me a crying emoji over a tangled necklace, I tapped back a heart and put my phone face down. By Thursday, the house had started talking in smells. Sour laundry, rotting dishes, teenage dread. Marco wore his PE jersey to every class because the rest of his shirts smelled off. He tossed me a grin as I came in with a bag of groceries for myself. "Hey, Clara, quick favor. Can you grab me some deodorant when you're out?" I opened the PDF of the agreement on my phone, the one with my tidy signature. "Sounds like mothering," I said. "I'm just the sister." He rolled his eyes and muttered that I was being emotional. The BO stayed like a mean joke that wouldn't land. Saturday night was Elena's orchestra performance. She walked on stage in a wrinkled, stained dress I used to dry clean without being asked. Whispers flickered through the auditorium. A few kids pointed. Afterward, her teacher approached Mom gently about the dress code. I smiled, bright and polite. "We're restructuring," I said loud enough for the cluster of parents to hear. I was overstepping by handling concert clothes. "Mom's in charge now, first time ever." "Right, Mom." Color bled out of Mom's face as a dozen eyes slid to her. The teacher's expression shifted from confusion to that tight, careful concern adults get when they sense a deeper problem. For the first time in a decade, I didn't rush to fix the moment. I let the silence sit between us, heavy as a full laundry basket. Somewhere in that hush, something cracked, not in me, but in the story we'd been telling about who held this family together. And by Monday, the knock on our door would prove it. By Monday morning, the consequences had grown legs. Mrs. Schneider, the school counselor, called during my lunch break. "Clara, several teachers have raised concerns about your siblings' welfare. Is everything all right at home?" I almost laughed. "You'll have to ask my mom," I said evenly. She made it very clear I'm not in charge anymore. Clara, you've always been the contact person, she insisted. Not anymore. They've established boundaries, and I'm respecting them. 20 minutes later, I heard the slam of our front door. Mom was crying before she even reached my room. Her mascara had carved black rivers down her cheeks. Please, Clara, CPS is coming today. If they see the house like this. Like what? I asked, tilting my head. You know what? The dishes, the laundry, your brother's grades, everything's a disaster. Wow, that does sound like a lot of mothering, I said softly. Good thing you're here to handle it. The doorbell rang, sharp and cold. We both froze. A woman's voice called through the door. Mrs. Laurent? Child Protective Services. We've received multiple reports. Mom turned to me, panic swimming in her eyes. Clara, please, she whispered. Help me. I just smiled, small and polite. Boundaries, remember? The social worker stepped inside, and her face transformed in seconds. The smell hit her first, a mixture of mold, dirty laundry, and something sour. Her nose twitched as her eyes scanned the chaos. Dishes crusted with fuzz, garbage piled in corners, flies orbiting pizza boxes. Marco stood in the doorway, still wearing that same PE shirt from last Monday, yellow stains under his arms like proof. The woman didn't need to say a word. She simply lifted her tablet and started taking photos, click, 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 documenting every forgotten chore and every undone responsibility. Mom stood frozen mute while flashes captured the wreckage of her better life. When the social worker opened the refrigerator, she stepped back instantly. One rotting container sat alone in an empty fridge. Mom started babbling. It's just been a bad week. We're usually organized. The woman looked up slowly, unimpressed. Mrs. Laurent, we've had several reports over the last 2 weeks about ongoing neglect. Your son has worn the same clothing for days. Your daughter came to a recital in soiled attire. Both have reported being hungry at school. Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's not true, it's Clara's fault. She's trying to make me look bad. The woman didn't even blink. Regardless of what Clara does or doesn't do, you are the parent, ma'am. Mom started to cry harder. She made this mess. She's punishing me. The social worker turned toward me. Clara, can we talk privately? I nodded and followed her into the dining room, where my laptop still sat open beside my neatly stacked college forms, the one clear space in the house. We sat down, and she gave me a gentle smile. I understand there have been some recent changes here. Can you explain what's been happening? Wordlessly, I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot, Mom's agreement, the digital proof of my exile from responsibility. Her eyes widened as she read. She made you sign this. She told me I was making everything about myself and needed to stop pretending to be their mother, I said. The woman began typing notes rapidly. And before this agreement, what exactly were you doing for the household? I exhaled slowly, then started listing. Waking them at 6:30, making breakfast, packing lunches, washing their clothes, paying bills online, scheduling appointments, helping with homework, attending conferences, cooking dinner, keeping the house alive. She stopped typing. For how long? Since I was 10, I said simply. The pen froze midair. 10 years old. I could see the disbelief flash across her face before she looked back down, typing again. I sat there quietly, hands folded as the sound of clicking keys filled the room, the sound of truth finally being written down. The social worker looked up from her tablet. 10 years, she repeated softly. I nodded. Mom had a boyfriend back then who didn't like kids around. She'd disappear for days, sometimes weeks. So, someone had to keep things running. Her gaze softened. Did anyone ever offer you help? Family, teachers, neighbors? Not really, I said. Everyone just thought I was responsible, mature for my age. She typed something, then sighed. That's not responsibility, Clara. That's survival. She called Elena next. My sister shuffled into the room, her hair tangled, and her shirt stained from breakfast. The woman smiled gently. Hi, Elena. Can you tell me how things have been at home? It took less than a minute for Elena to burst into tears. I'm hungry all the time, she sobbed. Mom doesn't buy groceries, and I don't have money for lunch. I only know how to make cereal, but we ran out of milk. Her little shoulders shook as she continued. Everyone laughed at my dress at the recital. Clara always made sure it was clean and pressed. Mom didn't even know it needed to be dry cleaned. The social worker nodded slowly, typing without interrupting. Thank you for telling me, sweetheart. You've done really well. Then came Marco. He slouched into the room with his usual defiance, arms crossed, eyes fixed anywhere but the woman in front of him. Marco, she said calmly, how long have you been wearing that shirt? He shrugged. I dunno. A few days. Do you know how to do laundry? He looked annoyed. Nobody ever taught me. Clara always just did it. The woman jotted that down, then asked about school. I failed my exam last week, he admitted. No one woke me up. Mom didn't even know what classes I'm taking. When she asked about food, he muttered, mostly cereal. I used my birthday money for McDonald's yesterday. From the living room, I heard Mom pacing. This is ridiculous, she hissed. They're exaggerating. You can't trust teenagers. But the social worker kept her focus steady. All right, she said to Marco. Thank you for being honest. When Mom's turn finally came, she marched in with a smile stretched so tight it looked painful. She tried to sit upright, crossing her legs like she was at an interview. I'm just overwhelmed, she began. Things got messy after Clara refused to help. But I'm trying. The woman asked calmly, what time do your children start school, ma'am? Mom blinked. 8? Or maybe 9. And who are their teachers? Mom faltered again. I don't remember all the names. What are Elena's allergy medications? No answer. What about Marco's vision plan? He's listed as needing glasses. Mom's silence stretched thin until the air itself felt heavy. Then came the final blow. Can you tell me when their last dental appointments were? Nothing. Just the sound of her breathing, fast and uneven. The social worker stood and made a phone call right there in front of us. Yes, she said into her headset. Immediate intervention. The home is uninhabitable. Clear signs of neglect. Mom lunged toward me, her hands clutching my arm so tightly that her nails dug in. Please, Clara, tell them this isn't how it looks. Tell them you'll help me. I gently pried her fingers loose. You made me sign an agreement, remember? Within the hour, 2 more workers arrived, armed with clipboards and cameras. They documented everything, the black mold in the bathroom, the garbage piles, the empty fridge. One of them found Elena's bloody underwear in her room from when she didn't know how to handle her period. When asked about it, my sister broke down again, crying. I didn't know what to do without Clara. And that was when the supervisor arrived, an older woman with gray hair and a voice like steel. She flipped through pages of notes and photos, then looked straight at my mother. Mrs. Laurent, she said evenly, based on what we've seen here today, we are placing both minor children in emergency protective custody. Mom's knees hit the floor. Please, I just need more time. The supervisor shook her head slowly. Your children are living in unsafe conditions without adequate care or supervision. And for the first time, Mom didn't argue. She just cried raw, shaking sobs, while strangers began packing her children's clothes into tiny suitcases. The sound of zippers and drawers echoed through the house like ghosts leaving their rooms. I stood in the doorway, frozen, watching Elena's small hands clutch the straps of her violin case as if it could anchor her to the floor. She didn't understand that the decision was already made. None of us did. Marco's face hardened, shifting from confusion to anger in seconds. You can't take us, he shouted, his voice cracking. It's just a bad week. The social worker remained calm, explaining that it wasn't punishment, it was protection. But her words only made the silence thicker. Mom lunged toward me again, gripping my arm with desperate strength. Clara, please, just tell them you'll take over again. Tell them you'll fix it like you always do. Her breath smelled like coffee and panic. I pried her fingers off one by one. You made me sign that agreement, I reminded her quietly. She shook me so hard my vision blurred. You're being cruel. You want this to happen. Before I could respond, the supervisor intervened, stepping between us. Ma'am, please stand back. Elena began screaming when a worker lifted her suitcase. Don't touch my stuff, she cried, tears streaking her cheeks. You can't just take it. Another worker knelt beside her, soft but firm. We're just packing what you'll need for now, sweetheart. You can bring your violin too. Marco stood in the living room doorway, pale and trembling, as if his brain refused to process that this was real. The workers moved efficiently, collecting clothes and toiletries, filling 2 small suitcases that looked pitiful beside the mountain of what they were leaving behind. 10 minutes later, everything was over. Elena was crying so hard she hiccuped between sobs, snot and tears mixing on her face. She kept looking at me, whispering, "Please fix it, Clara. Please." But I stayed still. My hands were clasped in front of me, the way you do when you're trying not to shatter. Marco's anger cracked into fear as one of the workers gently guided him toward the front door. "Wait," he said, turning to me. "You could stop this. Why won't you?" His voice broke on the last word. I had no answer that wouldn't destroy him more. Mom's sobs turned to screams. "You can't take my children." She threw herself toward the door, clutching at the supervisor's sleeve. "I'll change. I promise." The supervisor stepped back, signaling to her team, and 2 of them quietly blocked the path. "Ma'am, please," one said. "You're making this harder for them." Outside, the black SUV idled at the curb. The sound of its engine filled the silence that had swallowed our home. Elena looked over her shoulder as they led her down the steps, her face streaked with tears, her eyes wide with betrayal. Marco kept his gaze fixed on the ground. Mom followed them out, pleading incoherently. "Just 1 more minute. Let me talk to them." The supervisor's hand came down gently on her shoulder. "It's time to let them go for now." They drove off with both of them pressed to the back window, their faces small and blurred behind the glass. The car turned the corner and disappeared. Mom collapsed onto the driveway, sobbing into her hands, whispering their names like a prayer she no longer knew how to say. I stood by the front door, staring at the empty street. The quiet was almost physical, heavy, suffocating. For the first time in years, there was no noise, no footsteps, no "Clara, where's my homework?" or "Clara, can you fix this?" I went upstairs, packed a single duffel bag, and texted my friend Sophie. "Can I crash at your place for a while?" She replied within seconds, "Of course." An hour later, I was gone too. Mom didn't even notice me leave. That night, I sat on Sophie's bed staring at my silent phone. 17 missed calls. 8 voicemails. I pressed play once, just to hear what my mother's panic sounded like. "Clara, how could you do this? You ruined everything." Then another, her voice cracking. "Please come home, baby. Help me get them back." The rest swung like a pendulum. Guilt, rage, pleading, denial. I turned the phone off and stared at the ceiling until dawn. Sophie's mother made pancakes the next morning, humming to the radio. The smell of butter and sugar filled the air, warm and steady. I hadn't realized how foreign peace felt. But before I could taste it, there was a sharp knock at the front door. Mom. She looked like a ghost, hair tangled, mascara smudged, wearing yesterday's clothes. "I know she's here," she shouted, pushing past Sophie's dad into the kitchen. Her eyes locked on me. "You're coming home right now. We're fixing this." Sophie's father stepped between us. "You need to leave," he said calmly. "She's my daughter." Mom barked, her voice cracking. "I have every right." Sophie's mom quietly picked up the phone. "If you don't leave, we'll call the police." For a moment, I thought Mom might swing at her. Then she turned that rage back on me. "You think you're better than me now," she spat. "You destroyed your own family." She stormed out, slamming the door so hard a framed photo crashed to the floor. 2 days later, Mrs. Schneider, the school counselor, called again. Her tone was soft, the kind people use when they know you've already been through hell. "Clara, I wanted to check in. I heard what happened. I also wanted you to know that I'm proud of you for protecting yourself." Protecting myself. The words felt strange, like trying on a coat that actually fit. She told me the school would provide counseling if I needed it, and that the teachers had been worried about my siblings for weeks. "You did the right thing," she said before hanging up. 3 days later, a thick envelope arrived in my inbox, an official notice for a family court hearing. Temporary custody determination. I spent that night printing every piece of evidence I had, the signed agreement, the screenshots of Mom's texts, photos of the messy house. Each page felt like a scar pressed onto paper. The courthouse smelled like old wood and lemon polish. I arrived early, sitting outside the courtroom, watching families come and go, some crying, some silent. Mom arrived 15 minutes late. Her hair was greasy, pulled into a messy knot. The shirt she wore had wrinkles deep enough to tell stories. She kept glancing at her phone, probably waiting for her boyfriend, who never showed. When the judge called us in, I felt my chest tighten. The woman behind the bench looked like someone who'd seen every kind of broken family and stopped being surprised long ago. She began by reading the CPS report aloud, the photos of the house, the teacher's statements, the testimony from a social worker. Mom squirmed in her seat, muttering under her breath. Then the judge looked directly at her. "Mrs. Loran, how do you explain these conditions?" Mom sat up straighter, forcing a smile. "I was overwhelmed, Your Honor." Clara refused to help. She turned everyone against me. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. "What medications does your daughter take for her allergies?" Mom blinked. I think it's the little pink ones." "And your son's learning accommodations plan?" "I don't. What plan?" The judge sighed quietly, flipping through papers. "You're unaware he has one." Mom's mouth opened, then closed again. The judge nodded to the bailiff. "Please bring the children in." Elena and Marco entered, looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. The door closed behind them with a heavy thud. For 20 minutes, all I heard was the ticking of the courthouse clock. When the door opened again, Elena's eyes were red and swollen, and Marco's hands shook at his sides. The judge's verdict came like a clean cut: both children to remain in foster care. Mom to attend a 12-week parenting course, weekly therapy, and monthly inspections. Mom burst into tears, loud enough for the bailiff to flinch. Her phone began to ring mid-sob, her work number flashing on the screen. The judge allowed her to step outside. Through the door, everyone heard her boss firing her. When she came back, she looked hollowed out. The judge scheduled the next hearing for 3 months later. I left the courtroom first, my folder clutched tight against my chest. Outside, a woman stopped me, gray hair, tired eyes, Mom's nose. "Clara," she asked softly, "I'm your Aunt Gabrielle. I heard what happened. I should have checked in sooner." She offered me a spare room, said I'd be welcome anytime. I thanked her but told her I needed to learn how to live my own life first. She nodded like she understood. As I walked away, Mom passed me without a word, her eyes full of hate and something that looked a lot like regret. A week later, I was shelving books at the store when a co-worker mentioned seeing Marco at the grocery store with an older couple. "He looked miserable," she said, arguing about something. "Poor kid." That night, a text buzzed on my phone from one of Marco's friends. They split them up. Different foster homes, opposite sides of town. The message ended with, "He hates it there. Too many rules." I stared at the words for a long time. Rules. Structure. Bedtimes. Chores. All the things I'd begged for years to have. 2 days later, an email arrived from Elena's orchestra teacher. She had to drop out. Her foster family lives too far away. The teacher's message was kind, full of sympathy. "It's a shame. She had so much potential." I typed a short reply. "Please contact CPS for updates." I'm not her guardian anymore. My fingers trembled as I hit send. That weekend, Mom called. I didn't pick up the first 2 times. On the third, I answered. Her voice was shaking. I started parenting classes. "Clara," I had no idea how much I didn't know. "They spent 2 hours today just explaining child development. I didn't even realize what's normal for a teenager." Her voice cracked. "They made us share our morning routines, and I was the only one who didn't have one." She paused, sniffling. "I'm trying, Clara. I really am." I stayed silent. Finally, I said, "Then keep trying. That's what the classes are for." She sighed. "Couldn't you help me a little? Just explain what they need." "That would defeat the point, Mom." She hung up. For the first time in my life, I focused on my future. I picked up extra shifts at the bookstore, started saving for college. One of my coworkers told me about a support group for adults who'd been parentified as kids. The first meeting was in a church basement on a Tuesday night. The room smelled like coffee and old carpet. There were 8 of us. We sat in a circle, each taking turns. A woman described raising 4 brothers because her mom worked 3 jobs. A guy my age talked about caring for his disabled sister since he was 7. Another girl said she'd been paying bills since middle school because her parents couldn't read English well enough. When it was my turn, I told them about the agreement, the neglect, the removal, the silence afterward. I braced for judgment, but none came. Just nods of understanding. The facilitator, a calm woman with a silver ring on her thumb, said quietly, "What you went through is called parentification. It's not maturity. It's abuse." Her words hit harder than I expected. Abuse. No yelling, no hitting, but abuse all the same. We talked about guilt, about the ache that comes when you finally stop holding everything together. One woman said it took her years of therapy to believe she was allowed to rest. I walked out of that basement into the cool night air, feeling like I could finally breathe. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Hey, can I stop by the house? Your mom's not answering. I just need my work laptop." It was Mom's ex-boyfriend. I stared at it for 2 seconds, then blocked the number. 3 quiet weeks passed. I went to work, attended group meetings, started sleeping through the night. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, a familiar voice cracked the calm. "Clara." Marco stood on Sophie's porch, thinner, paler, backpack sagging on his shoulders. His eyes were red from crying. "I can't stay there anymore," he blurted out. "They have all these stupid rules, curfews, chores, no phone after 10. I can't take it. Please let me crash here. Just for a few nights." Sophie's mom looked at me, unsure. Marco's voice trembled. "I'll sleep on the floor. I'll help clean. Please, Clara, you know me." My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, the CPS emergency number glowing on the screen. His face changed instantly, confusion twisting into betrayal. "You're calling them? Are you serious?" Sophie's mom put a hand on my shoulder. I whispered the address into the phone, my voice steady even though my heart wasn't. Marco sat on the steps, staring at the ground, refusing to speak until the same social worker arrived, the one who'd first taken him away. She gave me a small, approving nod before leading him to her car. "Both kids are struggling," she told me gently. "But they're getting help now, real help." When the car disappeared down the street, I ran to the bathroom and threw up. Then I cried until my chest hurt. For the first time, I didn't cry for them. I cried for me. A week later, Mom called again. Her voice was hoarse, trembling with exhaustion. "They did the inspection today," she said. The CPS worker walked in, looked at the kitchen, and started writing things down before I could even say hello. The dishes, the smell, the mold in the shower. "I don't know how to clean it properly, Clara." I tried. She kept talking, desperate, her voice breaking between words. "I ruined the laundry again. Left the wet clothes in the washer for 3 days, and now they stink. The judge is extending foster care another 3 months. They said the house isn't safe yet." I stayed silent. There was nothing left to say. On Saturday, I ran into 2 of Mom's book club friends at the grocery store. Their stares could have cut glass. One of them whispered loud enough for me to hear, "That's the girl who turned her siblings in. Poor kids. Imagine betraying your own family like that." The other nodded, pity in her eyes. "Ungrateful child. Her mother's devastated." They walked off, shaking their heads. I wanted to scream, "You don't know anything." But I didn't. I just paid for my ramen and walked home. That evening, Sophie's mom called me into the kitchen. She had a laptop open and a folder full of papers. "Sit down, sweetheart," she said gently. "Let's make sure you're ready for college." Over the next hour, she showed me everything Mom never had. How to open a checking account, how to read bank fees, how to deposit a check with a phone. She helped me fill out my FAFSA form, explained how credit scores worked, and how to rent an apartment without getting scammed. "Your mom should have taught you this," she said quietly. "She was too busy," I replied. A few days later, a letter arrived, forwarded through CPS. The handwriting was messy, stained with tears. It was from Elena. "You're selfish," she wrote. "You destroyed our family. You could have fixed everything, but you didn't want to. Now I'm stuck with strangers who don't understand me. I hate you." I read it 3 times, my throat tightening with every line. The sting wasn't the hatred, it was how familiar it felt. She sounded just like Mom. At the next support group, I showed the letter to my therapist. She listened quietly, then said, "Anger is easier than grief, Clara. She's hurt, but you're the safest person to blame. It means she still loves you, even if she doesn't realize it yet. Her words didn't erase the pain, but they softened it enough for me to breathe again. 3 weeks later, Mom called again, crying so hard I could barely understand her. "They're evicting me, Clara. I missed rent 3 months in a row. I didn't realize how much you helped before. I tried budgeting, but it doesn't make sense. The bills just keep piling up." Her voice broke into a whisper. "I can't do this alone." I closed my eyes, listening to the static between us. "You're not alone," I said quietly. "You have my aunt now." Aunt Gabrielle had already stepped in, the same aunt who offered me a place months ago. She let Mom move into her guest room on one condition. Mom had to follow through with her classes, no excuses. For the first time, Mom agreed without arguing. It was strange hearing her sound small. Not cruel, not defensive, just human. Maybe, I thought, she was finally starting to see the truth. 2 months later, I received a letter from the courthouse stamped mandatory family therapy. It was part of the reunification process. All 4 of us were required to attend. The session was set for a Thursday. When I arrived, the courthouse waiting area smelled faintly of bleach and cheap coffee. Mom was already there, sitting with her hands clasped in her lap. For the first time in years, she actually looked put together. Her hair was brushed, her clothes clean and matching, her eyes clear. She didn't speak. Elena and Marco arrived with their caseworker, both looking uneasy, both avoiding my gaze. When our names were called, we entered a small therapy room and sat in a circle. The therapist, a calm woman with soft eyes and a clipboard, sat between Mom and me. "Let's start," she said gently. "Mrs. Laurent, tell us what you've learned from your parenting program." Mom took a deep breath. "That I knew nothing," she said. Her voice shook but didn't break. "I didn't understand what children needed. I didn't even know that 15-year-olds still need supervision, or that teenagers can't handle adult responsibilities. I thought Clara was helping me, but I made her my replacement." Her eyes filled with tears as she turned toward me. "I forced you to be the parent, Clara. I took away your childhood. I thought I was doing what I had to, but I was selfish. I didn't see how much I was hurting you." The words I'd waited years to hear finally fell into the room, heavy and trembling. But all I felt was emptiness. It was too late for apologies to rebuild a decade of damage. The therapist nodded gently. "Thank you for your honesty. Elena, would you like to share how you feel about what's happened?" Elena's face crumpled. "I miss Clara," she said, voice small. "But I hate her, too. She let everything fall apart. Why couldn't you just fix it, like you always did?" The therapist reached for tissues, her tone soft but steady. "Elena, your anger makes sense. But you're angry at the wrong person. Clara was a child, too. None of this should have been her job." Elena's shoulders shook as she started to sob. "I just want things to go back to how they were." "They can't," I whispered before I could stop myself. Her crying grew louder. Then the therapist turned to Marco, who was picking at a rip in his jeans. "What about you?" He didn't look up. "I get it now," he muttered. "Clara was doing everything. I just didn't want to lose how easy it was. Someone always fixing things." He finally met my eyes for 2 seconds, then looked away. "Sorry," he said, so quietly I almost missed it. But I heard enough to know it wasn't regret, it was recognition. The therapist wrote something down, then looked at all of us. "You've all been hurt in different ways," she said softly. "But healing starts when everyone accepts their part. For now, I recommend separate therapy before any more family sessions." Mom nodded. I did too. As we stood to leave, I realized something simple but huge. For the first time, I wasn't there to fix anyone. I walked out of that courthouse lighter than I'd felt since I was 10 years old. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived in the mail from the state university, thicker than usual. My hand shook as I tore it open. "Congratulations," it read. "You've been accepted with a full scholarship." I sat on Sophie's bed staring at the letter until tears blurred the words. She hugged me tight, laughing through her own tears. "You did it," she whispered. "You finally get to live your life." Over the next few weeks, she and her parents helped me fill out housing forms, choose classes, and buy dorm essentials. They even drove me to campus for orientation. The scholarship covered everything: tuition, meals, books, the kind of stability I'd only ever built for others. Meanwhile, Mom was still taking parenting classes at the community center. She called one evening, proud of herself for passing her first test. "I can finally cook chicken without undercooking it," she said with a shaky laugh. "Did you know kids actually have to eat every few hours?" I had no idea. Her pride sounded genuine, almost innocent. For once, I didn't feel bitterness, just distance. 6 weeks after my siblings were placed in foster care, Mom passed her first home inspection at Aunt Gabrielle's house. The judge reviewed the progress reports and approved supervised visits. Mom arrived 15 minutes late to the first one, blaming traffic. The social worker went over the rules twice. No promises about going home, no discussing the case. Elena spent the hour showing Mom her homework, while Marco barely looked up from his phone. The second visit went better. Mom brought snacks this time, peanut butter sandwiches. Unfortunately, Elena was allergic. The third visit, Mom remembered the allergy and showed up with safe snacks, but couldn't help Marco with his history project. She mixed up Civil War dates until he quietly gave up. Still, progress was progress. After 2 months, the judge approved weekend visits. The kids stayed with their foster parents during the week, with Mom Friday through Sunday. Mom picked them up 2 hours, late the first weekend. She forgot Elena's orchestra rehearsal and Marco's grocery store shifts. But slowly, she started remembering, setting alarms, writing lists, asking questions instead of pretending to know. The reports improved. Minor setbacks, the social worker wrote, but consistent effort. When August came, I packed my entire life into 2 bags and a backpack. Sophie's parents helped me move into the dorms. My roommate complained that her mom had called 4 times that day just to check in. I nodded politely, not knowing how to explain that I didn't know what that felt like. The first week of classes felt like stepping into another world, one where no one knew my history. I could just be Clara, not caretaker, not scapegoat, not substitute mom. Just a student. 3 weeks into the semester, a notification popped up on my phone. Elena had tagged me in a photo, her smiling beside a washing machine, captioned, "My foster mom taught me how to separate colors from whites." It wasn't much, but it was everything. I liked the post and sent a single heart emoji. A month later, Marco messaged me on Facebook. "Can you check my college essay for grammar?" Then a follow-up, "Never mind, I forgot I'm not supposed to ask for help lol." We both sent laughing emojis. For the first time in forever, it didn't feel heavy. It felt like healing. By winter, the reports from the social worker were glowing. Mom was on time for every visit, remembered meal plans, and even packed lunches the night before. "She's still learning," the worker wrote, "but she's trying, really trying." At the next court review, the judge allowed full reunification once the school year ended. The condition: therapy would continue, and they'd keep living with Aunt Gabrielle until Mom could maintain stability alone. The day they moved back in, Mom texted me, "Dinner Saturday." I stared at the message for 20 minutes before replying, "Okay." Driving to my aunt's house felt strange. For years, I'd imagined this road as an escape route. Now it led me back. The smell of real food hit me first when I walked in. Garlic bread and spaghetti, nothing fancy, but made from effort instead of guilt. The house wasn't spotless, but it was alive. Elena ran up, proudly handing me her report card. 2 C's, 3 B's, 1 A- in art. "I earned them all by myself," she said, glowing. "I study now." Her smile was different, softer, steadier. Marco showed me photos from his part-time job at the grocery store. "I'm saving for a car," he said, chest puffed out. "I've already got 400. After dinner, Mom asked if we could talk outside. She sat on the porch steps, hands trembling slightly. "My therapist helped me see it," she said. "How I stole your childhood. How you were a child raising children." Her voice cracked. I didn't even know how to love properly. I was too busy trying to feel wanted by everyone else. And I missed you completely. For once, I didn't interrupt. I just let her speak. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For all of it. For the years you carried what I should have." Her tears were quiet, not the loud kind that begged for sympathy. And for the first time, I believed she meant it. When we went back inside, Elena was waiting by the door. "Can I hug you?" she asked shyly. I nodded. She wrapped her arms around me, so tightly it knocked the air from my lungs. "I get it now," she murmured. "You were a kid too. You were just trying to survive." She showed me a bracelet she'd made in therapy, little beads spelling out sister. "I made one for you too," she said. Marco followed, giving me an awkward shoulder bump. "Thanks for making us grow up," he said. "Didn't think we'd ever have to." I smiled, blinking back tears. 6 months had passed since CPS first came to the door. The house wasn't perfect. There were still dishes in the sink, a few mismatched socks on the couch, but it felt real. Mom could cook 5 meals from scratch, my siblings did their homework and laundry, and I was finally building a life that belonged only to me. Sometimes I still woke up expecting to hear someone calling my name. "Clara, help me." But the silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. I realized then that letting things fall apart hadn't been cruelty. It was mercy for them and for me, because saving myself wasn't selfish. It was the first real act of love I'd ever done for all of us.